Roberto framed the letter and hung it in his custodial closet, next to a collection of thank you notes from students and parents whose lives he'd touched through small acts of translation and cultural guidance. But the recognition that meant the most to Roberto came from an unexpected source. A group of international students at Lincoln High School organized a cultural appreciation assembly designed to celebrate the school's diversity and recognize the people who help international families feel welcome. Roberto was invited as the guest of honor, not because of his work with the FBI, but because of his daily efforts to help students and families navigate cultural differences. At the assembly, 17-year-old Fatima Al-Hassan, a refugee student from Syria, spoke about Roberto's impact on her educational experience. "When I first came to Lincoln High School, I felt invisible. My English was limited, my cultural references were different, and I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. Mr. Martinez was the first person who spoke to me in Arabic, not because he had to, but because he saw that I needed someone to acknowledge that my language and my culture had value." Fatima looked directly at Roberto, who was sitting in the front row of the auditorium, still wearing his gray custodial uniform. "Mr. Martinez taught me that being smart isn't about speaking perfect English or understanding every American cultural reference. He showed me that my ability to speak multiple languages and understand different cultures is a strength, not a limitation. Because of his encouragement, I'm now tutoring other international students, and I'm planning to study international relations in college." Roberto listened to Fatima's speech with the same quiet satisfaction he'd felt during his years of government service, when successful negotiations prevented conflicts that the public would never know about. After the assembly, as Roberto was returning to his custodial duties, Principal Chen approached him one more time. "Roberto, I have to ask you something that's been bothering me since the FBI incident. How many other people in our school district, how many other people in our community are we overlooking because we make assumptions based on job titles or appearances?" Roberto considered the question seriously. "Principal Chen, I think every person carries skills, experiences, and knowledge that might surprise you if you took the time to learn their story. The difference is that most people don't get the chance to demonstrate their hidden capabilities in such dramatic circumstances. What should we do differently? Maybe start by asking people about their backgrounds and interests, not just their job responsibilities. You might discover that your security guard is a published poet, or that your cafeteria worker is a former engineer, or that your bus driver speaks 5 languages." 6 months later, Lincoln High School implemented a hidden talents program that encouraged all staff members, from teachers to custodians to cafeteria workers, to share their backgrounds, skills, and interests with the school community. The program revealed former musicians, published authors, military veterans, world travelers, and experts in dozens of fields working in support roles throughout the school. Roberto continued working as a custodian, but he also began offering informal language lessons to students and staff, and he served as an unpaid consultant to the school district on cultural sensitivity and international family engagement. 1 year after the hostage crisis, Agent Rodriguez visited Roberto at Lincoln High School. "Mr. Martinez, I wanted to give you an update. The 3 hostage takers were sentenced last month, but because of the peaceful resolution of the crisis, they received reduced sentences and their families were not prosecuted. The 17 people they took hostage have all returned to their normal lives. None of this would have been possible without your intervention." Roberto nodded, continuing to clean the classroom windows as they talked. "Mr. Martinez, I also wanted to tell you that your work that day has been used as a case study at the FBI Academy. Future agents are learning about the critical importance of cultural understanding and expert translation in crisis situations. I'm glad something positive came from the experience." Agent Rodriguez watched Roberto work for a moment, then asked the question she'd been wondering about for a year. "Mr. Martinez, do you ever regret leaving intelligence work? Do you ever feel like you're underutilizing your talents?" Roberto finished cleaning the last window and turned to face Agent Rodriguez. "Agent Rodriguez, for 30 years I used my language skills to prevent wars and resolve international crises. That work was important, and I'm proud of it. But now I use those same skills to help a Syrian refugee feel less alone, to help Korean parents understand their child's homework, and to help teachers connect with students whose cultures they don't understand. Roberto gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to move to the next classroom. The scale is different, but the impact is just as real. Yesterday's international crisis might save hundreds of lives. Today's conversation with a confused student might change one life. Both matter. Roberto Martinez understood that true service isn't about recognition or appropriate utilization of credentials. It's about using whatever skills you possess to help others, whether that means negotiating the release of hostages or helping a teenager understand that speaking multiple languages is a superpower, not a limitation. Because wisdom doesn't always wear a suit and carry a briefcase. Sometimes it pushes a mop cart through school hallways, speaks 12 languages, and reminds us that the most important intelligence work happens in the everyday moments when one person helps another person feel understood. And sometimes, the most overlooked person in the building is exactly the person who holds the keys to solving problems no one else can handle. If you enjoyed this story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel because tomorrow I have another story, especially for you. For the next 2 hours, Roberto sat in the FBI command center, providing real-time translation and cultural interpretation that guided the federal response to the hostage crisis. He identified personal details about the hostage takers that helped negotiators understand their motivations. He detected subtle changes in their emotional state that indicated when they were becoming more or less receptive to negotiation. He caught cultural references and linguistic patterns that revealed information about their backgrounds and potential vulnerabilities. Most importantly, Roberto recognized a critical moment when the hostage takers began speaking in a mixture of languages that indicated they were preparing to surrender, but only if specific cultural protocols were followed that would allow them to maintain dignity in front of their families and communities. Agent Rodriguez, Roberto said urgently, they're discussing terms for surrender, but they're using language that indicates they need to be approached according to traditional honor codes. If your negotiators can acknowledge their grievances without accepting their methods, and if they can guarantee that their families won't be prosecuted for their actions, they're prepared to release the hostages. The negotiation that followed Roberto's interpretation lasted exactly 47 minutes. All 17 hostages were released unharmed. The 3 hostage takers surrendered peacefully and were taken into custody. What could have been a national tragedy became a textbook example of successful crisis resolution through cultural understanding and expert communication. Agent Rodriguez approached Roberto as the command center was winding down its operations. Mr. Martinez, I don't know how to thank you adequately. Your translation work and cultural analysis were the key factors in resolving this situation peacefully. Roberto began removing the headphones and gathering his materials. I'm glad I could help. Mr. Martinez, I have to ask, why are you working as a school custodian? With your background and skills, you could be working with federal agencies, international corporations, or academic institutions. Roberto paused for a moment, considering how to explain a decision that most people in the intelligence community found incomprehensible. Agent Rodriguez, for 30 years I carried the weight of knowing that my translations could start wars or prevent them, that my cultural interpretations could save lives or cost them. After 3 decades of that pressure, I wanted a job where the most important decision I made was which classroom to clean first. But don't you feel like you're wasting your talents? Roberto smiled slightly. I teach students new vocabulary words when they need help. I help international families communicate with teachers during parent conferences. I resolve cultural misunderstandings between students from different countries. I may be using my skills on a smaller scale, but I'm not wasting them. Agent Rodriguez handed Roberto a business card. Mr. Martinez, if you ever decide you want to return to federal service, please call me. The country needs people with your abilities. Roberto took the card and put it in his wallet next to his inactive security clearance documentation. Thank you. I'll keep that in mind. When Roberto returned to Lincoln High School the next morning, word of his involvement in the hostage crisis had already spread throughout the building. Students and teachers looked at him with a mixture of curiosity, respect and embarrassment at how completely they had misjudged him. Principal Chen approached him in the main hallway during his usual morning cleaning routine. "Roberto, I owe you an apology. For 15 years, I've treated you as if your only value to this school was your maintenance work. I had no idea about your background or your capabilities." "Principal Chen, you have nothing to apologize for. I chose this job, and I chose not to share my background. You treated me with respect and gave me exactly the work environment I was looking for. But Roberto, with your qualifications, you could be teaching languages, working in international relations, consulting with government agencies. Why continue working as a custodian?" Roberto leaned on his mop handle and looked around at the bustling hallway filled with students from dozens of countries, speaking fragments of their native languages as they hurried to class. "Principal Chen, yesterday I helped prevent a national tragedy by using skills I learned over 30 years of government service. But every day I work here, I help students navigate cultural differences, overcome language barriers, and feel less alone in a country where their voices sometimes aren't heard. That work might not make headlines, but it changes lives one conversation at a time." Over the following weeks, Roberto's role at Lincoln High School evolved in subtle but significant ways. He continued his custodial duties, but teachers began approaching him for help with international students who were struggling with cultural adaptation. Parents who spoke limited English started asking specifically for Roberto when they needed to communicate with school officials. Students began stopping by his custodial closet to practice their foreign language skills or to ask questions about international affairs. The school administration offered Roberto a position as a cultural liaison or language instructor, but he declined, preferring to maintain his dual role as custodian and informal cultural bridge. 3 months after the hostage crisis, Roberto received a letter from the Department of Defense recognizing his civilian contribution to national security. The letter was signed by officials whose names he recognized from his intelligence career, acknowledging his role in the peaceful resolution of the crisis and thanking him for his continued service to his country, even in his civilian capacity. "Our regular translators are either unavailable or don't have the specific dialectical knowledge we need. We need someone who can understand not just the words, but the cultural context and subtext of what these individuals are saying." Principal Chen began mentally cataloging the school's staff. "Well, we have Mrs. Patterson who teaches French, and Mr. Kim teaches Korean, and our ESL coordinator speaks Spanish and some Portuguese. Ma'am, I need to be very clear about this. This is a federal emergency. We need someone who can handle multiple languages simultaneously, someone with experience in high-pressure translation work, preferably with some background in international affairs or conflict resolution." Principal Chen felt helpless. The description Agent Rodriguez was providing didn't match any of her staff members. "I'm sorry, Agent Rodriguez, but I don't think we have anyone with that level of expertise." Roberto stopped cleaning the windows. For 15 years, he'd maintained perfect professional distance from situations that might require his specialized skills. He'd chosen this job specifically to avoid the kind of high-stakes translation work that had defined his previous career. But listening to Agent Rodriguez describe a hostage situation where people's lives depended on accurate communication, Roberto felt the familiar pull of duty that had driven his entire adult life. "Principal Chen," Roberto said quietly, setting down his cleaning supplies. Principal Chen looked at Roberto with surprise. In 15 years of working at the school, she'd rarely heard him speak unless directly asked a question about his maintenance duties. "Yes, Roberto, could I speak with Agent Rodriguez?" Principal Chen looked confused but handed him the phone. "Agent Rodriguez, this is Roberto Martinez. I'm a custodial staff member at Lincoln High School. I might be able to help with your translation needs." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Martinez, I appreciate the offer, but this is a very specialized situation. We need someone with professional-level fluency in multiple languages and experience with high-pressure communication scenarios." "I understand," Roberto said calmly. "I speak Arabic, Farsi and Russian fluently, along with 9 other languages. I have 30 years of experience providing real-time translation services for federal agencies in crisis situations." Agent Rodriguez's tone changed immediately. "Mr. Martinez, Can you please explain your background? I was a senior intelligence officer with the Defense Language Institute from 1985 to 2015. I specialized in Middle Eastern and Eastern European languages with a focus on conflict resolution and international negotiation. I hold advanced security clearances that are currently inactive but can be reactivated if necessary. The silence on the phone lasted nearly 10 seconds. Principal Chen stared at Roberto as if seeing him for the first time, trying to reconcile the quiet janitor she'd known for 15 years with the man who was calmly discussing federal security clearances with an FBI agent. Mr. Martinez, Agent Rodriguez said finally, "Can you be at the federal building in downtown in 30 minutes? Yes, we'll have a car pick you up immediately." And Mr. Martinez, "Thank you." Roberto hung up the phone and turned to face Principal Chen, who was looking at him with an expression of complete bewilderment. "Roberto," she said slowly, "I think I need to sit down." 25 minutes later, Roberto walked into the FBI's Crisis Command Center, wearing his gray custodial uniform and carrying a small bag containing notebooks and reference materials he'd kept from his intelligence career, materials he'd told himself he would never need again. The command center was filled with federal agents, local police officials, and crisis negotiation specialists, all focused on multiple computer screens showing surveillance footage from the International Trade Center. Agent Rodriguez, a woman in her 40s with the focused intensity of someone accustomed to high-pressure situations, approached Roberto immediately. "Mr. Martinez, thank you for coming. I need to brief you quickly on the situation." Agent Rodriguez led Roberto to a bank of monitors displaying the scene at the trade center. 3 armed individuals have taken 17 hostages on the 14th floor. They're demanding the release of prisoners from federal detention and safe passage out of the country. The problem is that they're communicating in multiple languages, switching between Arabic, Farsi and Russian, and our translators are having difficulty with the dialectical variations and cultural context. She handed Roberto a set of headphones connected to the surveillance audio. "We need to know not just what they're saying, but what they're really communicating. Their emotional state, their level of commitment to their demands, any indication of their willingness to negotiate, or their plans for the hostages." Roberto put on the headphones and listened for 30 seconds. His expression grew more serious as he processed the conversation. The primary speaker is using a northern Iraqi dialect of Arabic, but he's incorporating Farsi phrases that suggest either Iranian education or family connections. The second speaker is responding in Russian with a Chechen accent. They're not just coordinating their immediate actions, they're discussing family members and personal grievances that suggest this is more than ideological terrorism. Agent Rodriguez looked at the other federal officials in the room. "What does that mean for our negotiation strategy?" "It means they're emotionally invested in a way that makes them more dangerous but also more potentially reachable through personal appeals rather than political negotiations. If I could listen to more of their conversation, I might be able to identify specific cultural references or family concerns that could provide negotiation leverage." They saw him as invisible, the old man who mopped floors and emptied trash cans while brilliant students and educated teachers conducted the real work of learning. But when diplomats, federal agents and international crisis negotiators couldn't find anyone who could communicate in the 12 languages they desperately needed, the most overlooked person in Lincoln High School became the most important person in the room. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because stories like this one, that challenge everything we think we know about the people around us, are exactly what Honor Reward is all about. Trust me. By the end of this video, you'll never look at anyone the same way again. Roberto Martinez has been pushing the same gray maintenance cart through the hallways of Lincoln High School for exactly 15 years, 2 months and 8 days. Not because he's counting, but because routine creates invisibility, and invisibility has been his shield for longer than most of the students have been alive. At 62, Roberto moves through the school like a ghost, arriving before the first bell, working through lunch while everyone else eats, staying until after the last bus departs. Students step around him without acknowledgement. Teachers nod politely but rarely engage in conversation, and administrators see him as a line item in the budget rather than a person with a story worth knowing. What none of them realize is that Roberto Martinez spent 30 years as a senior intelligence officer with the Defense Language Institute, specializing in real-time translation and cultural interpretation for the most sensitive military and diplomatic operations in 12 different languages. They don't know that he holds advanced degrees in linguistics, international relations, and cultural anthropology from universities they've never heard of because the programs were classified. They see the gray coveralls and the quiet demeanor and assume they know everything they need to know about the man who cleans their school. They have no idea that Roberto understands every conversation they have in Spanish, Arabic, Korean, Russian, Mandarin, Farsi, German, French, Portuguese, Japanese, Hindi, or Italian, languages he speaks with the fluency of someone who has negotiated treaties, prevented international incidents, and saved lives through the precise use of words. Roberto chose this job, this invisibility, this deliberate underestimation, for reasons that go far beyond simple employment. After 3 decades of carrying state secrets and military intelligence, he wanted a life where the most complicated decision he faced was which cleaning supplies to use in which classroom. After years of high-pressure translation work where a single mistranslated word could start wars or end peace negotiations, he found peace in the simple, predictable rhythms of maintenance work. But on this particular Wednesday afternoon in November, Roberto's carefully constructed anonymity was about to be shattered by the kind of international crisis that required exactly the skills he'd been hiding for 15 years. The day started like every other day at Lincoln High School. Roberto arrived at 6 a.m., 2 hours before the first students, and began his systematic cleaning routine. First the main hallways, then the classrooms, then the administrative offices, each task completed with the methodical precision that had once made him the most sought-after translator in the intelligence community. Lincoln High School serves a remarkably diverse population. Students from over 30 countries attend classes here, representing families who came to America seeking better opportunities, political asylum, or educational advancement. The school takes pride in its multicultural environment, offering ESL programs and celebrating International Heritage Months with colorful displays and cultural presentations. What the school administration doesn't fully appreciate is how many of their students struggle with language barriers that go far beyond what their ESL programs can address. Roberto sees these struggles every day, students trying to explain complex family situations to counselors who don't speak their language, parents attempting to communicate with teachers through inadequate translation apps, international students feeling isolated because their cultural references and humor don't translate into English social dynamics. Roberto helps when he can, in small ways that don't draw attention to his linguistic abilities. He might quietly translate a difficult word for a confused student, or explain an American cultural reference to an international exchange student who looks lost during lunch conversation. To everyone else, these interactions look like a kind janitor being helpful. They have no idea they're witnessing a world-class linguist providing expert cultural interpretation. At 2:47 p.m. on this particular Wednesday, Roberto was cleaning the windows in the main office when the phone rang with the kind of urgency that changes everything. Principal Margaret Chen answered on the first ring, and Roberto couldn't help but overhear the conversation because he was working just 15 feet away. Lincoln High School, Principal Chen speaking. "Ma'am, this is Agent Sarah Rodriguez with the FBI. We have an urgent situation and we need immediate assistance. We're looking for someone who can provide real-time translation services in multiple Middle Eastern and Eastern European languages. We were told your school has a diverse population and might have staff members with those language capabilities." Principal Chen looked confused and slightly panicked. "Agent Rodriguez, I can try to help, but what exactly are you looking for?" "We have a hostage situation at the International Trade Center downtown. The suspects are communicating in Arabic, Farsi, and what sounds like Russian.